remodeling of buildings 205, 7, and 8, and we'll talk about that in a bit. VA is committed to the draft master plan, and we had the chief of staff out here from VA, the third in the line of leadership, and the chief of staff really leaned into this, has brought resources and some focus to the master plan effort that we're doing now, as well as the redevelopment on the North Campus, the funding we needed for turnover activities and for the upgrade of infrastructure to support this. You can see the bottom there, the OIG is tasked with doing audits, and they've just completed a recent audit at the 5-year, just prior to the 5-year mark, so they can get that out before the end of the fiscal year, I think is their goal. So they're going through the drafts of that. And we also have in the draft master plan, the Community Oversight and Engagement Board, which we meet with regularly, and they have, I believe, quarterly public meetings as well. Next slide. So just go to a purpose right up here of what we're doing today and leaning forward. There was significant stakeholder input in the draft master plan as we started with a clean slate or a clean canvas. And there was a lot of negotiation and meetings about what could and should be done with the campus, who it should be for, what the vision should be. And it really gave some boundaries in that framework of what kind of housing it would be and the size of the housing. There was a timeline put in there with some numbers towards what the environmental approvals would, how much time that would take, and it took a little longer than it was anticipated. And then there wasn't a lot of detail as far as the state of the land for construction, what's underground. We have some construction coming up that'll be turned over. Lots will be turned over next year that are parking lots. And there's a lot of utilities underneath those that have to be moved and rerouted and things. So not a lot of thought was put into that, but we're working through that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You can see the continued stakeholder engagement is what we're trying to do now. We're explaining where the draft master plan came from, what we've done over the last 4.5 years, what we're set to do and leaning into as the boundaries of going forward. We've engaged with a principal developer to develop a draft community plan. You can see the construction, those first 3 buildings for the 180 units that I talked about. So we're on that path going forward. And we'll talk about what the options are and the input we're seeking to refine what we're doing as we go into the next 5 years and even 10 years, looking at the 5-year period after that. And appreciate everybody's time today. Certainly don't want to waste it. We'll go to the next slide. So just wanted to lean back into that first part. I talked about some of the things we've done in the past, some of the things that are important in getting to where we're at today. The focus is obviously development of land, supporting homeless and veterans and permanent supportive housing. So there was a plan that was called for as part of the original documentation, and that was a homeless veteran service platform came out of that, a plan to address some of the homelessness. We have a community and engagement and reintegration service here. It's been as large as well, we're up to about 450 individuals now. It's been larger than that. We've realigned some of the nursing back to nursing services. We're working on some of the physicians. Those services can either be split up and some of them managed within SERS or taken back to their service line to be managed, but also supporting homeless veterans and those in need or vulnerable to homelessness from their own service line. So we're working that to make sure we have it right sized for the needs. Land reform was an issue, followed by the West LA Leasing Act, which really codified some of what we're doing here in the master plan. So we have a land use advisory committee. We receive applications for use of land and we go through those. We make decisions. If it appears we get them wrong or they're not quite right, or it's, as the IG has said in some of their reports, and that it's not veteran-centric enough, then we go back and revisit those and we'll change those accordingly. Environmental and historic due diligence, it's worth mentioning here, and I wanted to put it on the slide so folks could read it. and spend some time because it slowed us down for a bit. It was a bigger slowdown than was anticipated in the framework. We had large portions of the campus assessed under the PEIS, the Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, so that we didn't have to do each parcel as we went along or each piece of land for each building. But we tried to do as much as we could at one time. And it took a while for all of that to be done and the impacts to come back and the agreements to be made. And of course, we had the CEQA, the environmental portion to do as well. And we did that with the state, the Environmental Quality Act. So that protects all of the historic natures of the properties and no damage to the property overall by doing this. And that's what really helped us come up with the number of individuals that could be on the property and on the land and what the land could sustain according to these rules and regulations. So we had to go through that process, got it out of the way, started moving forward. So in the bottom there is we're doing infrastructure assessments. There was a overall assessment done by Construction Facilities Management out of VA Central Office, CFM. They spent a few $1 million and came up with the cost for the North and the South Campus, and we've extrapolated from that the amount of money that we would need on the North Campus to upgrade the infrastructure. It really focused on 8 key infrastructure elements: the power, the water, the sewer, the stormwater, the telecommunications, all of that kind of thing. About, I think it was 60-some million dollars that we would need on the North Campus, and we're starting to get that now, and we're working through that. We've got 17 million in projects that we're already working on and should have committed, obligated for contracts within the next few months by the end of the fiscal year, the end of September. So working that hard to make sure we're getting those upgrades in place. Next slide. So zone 1, I just want to lean through these zones pretty quick, make sure I get these. So zone 1 there's conceptual diagram. It's a little difficult to see, but that big gray block just south of Wilshire on the right there is building 500. That's the main medical center. What you can see north of that, lot 42, the purple area, is a easement to the transportation system here in the area for a metro station, and that was finished here in the last few months. So they are building a metro station, probably a 4 to 6 year plan. As they build the station, the tunnel boring machine is already underground and has started tunneling towards it. They have one coming from the other station upline, and they'll connect the two. So that is underway. The replacement tower for building 500, because building 500 is not seismic compliant, not significantly out of compliance, but some of the elevator areas and things wouldn't align right in a future earthquake of any significant size. So there's the issue of where the replacement tower would go, and that's kind of down to the south there. You can see that area right behind it, that long orange area directly behind it on the left side. And then an additional ambulatory care center is contemplated, not yet confirmed. There would be a consolidated research center somewhere on the left there. That research center would allow us to get out of some of the buildings on the North Campus that would be used for the principal developers' enhanced use lease housing projects. So we want to consolidate and get down to the south. And there's some need to do that for seismic reasons. Some of those buildings are not seismically sound. There would be a VA parking garage contemplated because we're giving up some of this surface level space with these additional construction in large building areas. And then there's a Metro parking garage further south on the left that Metro is committed to, since they are taking up a portion of our parking lot 42 in the front. We'll get a small portion back, but as they take up that area, they've committed to providing us with a parking garage. We have the new kitchen in the bottom right, the dietetics building under construction, about 30% complete. That'll come online and allow us to turn over the building on the north, which is currently the kitchen, which the principal developer has as a significant building in their community plan. And then there's a power station and power unit, upgrading that, providing redundancy and power for the new critical care center. So we're working all those things. We're having briefings here in the next month or two with CFM, Construction and Facilities Management, that I mentioned before, as to the way ahead and what that looks like. So we're working on that. What it really is a recommitment and reinvestment in healthcare, which the draft master plan called for, to support the veterans in this area and to support really all the veterans, because this is our major medical center north of Long Beach and south of Sacramento. Next slide. Just wanted to talk about Zone 2. As you come north of, just back up for a second. Just give you a quick look. So everything here is south of Wilshire, but what we're talking about north right now is just north of Wilshire, which is just north of Lot 42 on the north side of those ramps. Next slide. So in this area, we have the Community Living Center. We have some other things going on there that are specific to us. We're going to do an area, additional beds, care beds, and building 212, I believe it is. So we're going to redo that. But I wanted to lay out here, and if you start at the bottom there, you have the low barrier to entry. We have care, treatment, rehabilitative services. Those are the tents you see to the right there in the center on the bottom. That's the initiative we started during COVID. A lot of folks are familiar with that. That's low barrier to entry. They can come in, have a clean environment, get donated meals, the tent and the sleeping gear and all that is donated. We have a shower trailer, we have restrooms there, and we're looking to expand that and move it into some type of tiny shelter, tiny home type environment that we can do. We're working on that. We've just about got a plan nailed down. We've worked out some of the plumbing and power requirements and things, and we'll work out the donation aspect of how we manage that in accordance with the land use requirements in the West LA Leasing Act. We also have safe parking down in Zone 1. That's down near our southern gate to the property, and that's an area where about a dozen vehicles park every night. We've had more, we've had less, but it's generally about a dozen, and folks are able to stay there, get counseling, get food and some other things, and stay in their vehicles. The next level up would be emergency housing. We have a bridge home, the bridge home shelter, the two side-by-side sprung shelters. Right now, that's at about 50 veterans are in there. They do have a restricted number of about 60 during COVID. And as we know, COVID is surging again, as Dr. Braverman talked about. We also have the domiciliary. I don't want to ignore that, but folks go generally from entering the campus, and then emergency housing over to domiciliary. Their current census is about 140 with 10 females in there. And they've reopened the COVID area on one of the top floors where they have one positive, and as of yesterday, they had two PUIs or individuals that they're watching to see if they are actually positive. We have transitional housing, building 116, New Directions, and then of course we have building 209, the permanent supportive housing, which is the ultimate goal. So we do have capacity in all these programs, and they are part of what we do today, and will to some degree remain part of what we do over time. Next slide. So Zone 3, I'm just going to give a nod to it here. There's a lot of information, and we'll talk about at the end where you can find the draft community plan from the principal developers. We've worked through that with them. We call it draft because it's not yet agreed to and not yet done. And that's part of us not wanting to say, this is what we got, this is where we're going, but to allow others to look at it and provide feedback as well. But I'm really going to let them get into the discussion of the community plan. I just wanted to put it up here, and it'll be part of this slide deck, which folks will be able to get to once the meetings are over. We'll post this slide deck as well. Next slide. Zone 4 is that green area. Some of it wrapped around the northwest on the other side of the Arroyo, which is somewhat dislocated from the campus. It went further north and then down around the right side as well in the northeast. And then a little bit on the south where we have the greater Grand Lawn area and some open space there. National Cemetery Administration has phase one of 1,000 niches, which is open. It's a beautiful space on the eastern side, but for Sepulveda Boulevard, it would connect to the main cemetery on the other side of the road, so just across the street from the main LA cemetery. They have phase two, which is probably going to start pre-development or pre-construction a year out, and that'll be just in that northwest corner. As you look at that diagram, they're going to fill the rest of that out with another niche setup. We talked about the Purple Line metro station. There's a rendition of what it might look like. Jackie Robinson Stadium, that is a land use lease. That continues to run. That is to the west of where the niches are on that eastern side of the northern part of the campus. Brentwood School has a lease for some space, some fields, a pool, and some other areas. Veterans do get to use that area. And that is a lease as well. They are providing quite a bit of support to the homeless and meals and other things associated with CTRS during this COVID period. Veterans Barrington Park is there. That's a park that's used for the fields and for dog walking, and they do have some programs, although programs have been limited in the last year and a half. They were just starting to get back into it in the last 5 or 6 months, and as COVID has come back around here in the last couple months, things are slowing down just a bit. That's part of that area that's on the opposite side of the arroyo, or that large gully area, and it's separated. The only way to get to it is to go off campus, go north, and then get to that area. And then the bottom there, safe parking. There's 2 parking lots out there where VA, just in that area, that dislocated area where VA runs the parking, allows veterans to park for free and community members have to pay. Everything except operating expenses comes back to VA, and with the latest law that was passed in the last few months, we're able to use all of that revenue in many different ways to help support housing. Although we can't do housing ourselves, we can support the housing. Next slide. Okay, West LA Leasing Act. Just wanted to throw some things up here. This comes out of the law, so we wanted to just start here and throw these out there, and this will be part of the slide deck. But we really want to talk about other opportunities, other amenities, types of housing, whether we want to see female housing, family housing, some of the elderly housing for veterans coming forward, what the community thinks about what we're doing. Really, the process is involved, all different aspects of it. We don't want to just limit it to amenities, but this was in the law, so we wanted to include this here. But our look is across everything. We're not starting with a clean slate. We've got a lot of history of what we're doing, and the principal developer will share their community plan. Next slide. We can bring this back up towards the end and talk about it again, or if there's specific questions about it, but we've created this under our West LA draftmasterplan.org website. There's a website link you can hit that and you can start through this process. You can see step 1. When you get to that main page, you can hit master plan, and that'll take you in where you can complete a questionnaire that'll bring you back here. You can submit your questionnaire, but that blue box in the center there really says for additional documents. And in that additional document area, we've just placed a couple at this point. One is the master plan update concept paper. It's a 15-page paper that talks through a lot of the history, where we're at today and where we're going. The second thing is we will have a link, and eventually you'll be able to reach the principal developer's draft community plan there, but it's also under the library. If you look at that bar where the blue arrow at the top is, the third entry in is a library, so you can go there and read the draft community plan as well. And there is the ability to attach files here as you go through, but we're also going to, after we've got some more information out and done a few more engagements, we're going to also open up the Federal Register and have a place where folks can go to the Federal Register and place comments and attach files as well as input. And it's our intent to go through all that and consider it before we finalize it. Next slide. think this is the last slide I'm going to hit before I turn it over to the principal developer. So just a quick timeline of what we see, some of the things here. Goal is to have this done the end of December so the secretary can sign it. Obviously, we have to move it up the chain for reviews and concurrences before that. So having our product moving up somewhere around the Thanksgiving holiday or just before. We're doing some of you can see the contract for this effort was awarded a few weeks back. We've had a meeting a few weeks back. We're leaning into it here with this kickoff. We have another kickoff a few hours after this meeting. We have some other engagements, a second engagement there on the 8th of September, another one on 27 September, and we'll open those up to groups. And then we want to we anticipate providing briefings to our VCOEB, the Oversight and Engagement Board. And then we'll talk about it briefly at our traditional town halls with the groups, give a brief update. So we'll be changing up a little of what we do there. There'll be another engagement. So, come October, as we get that date firmed up, we'll be presenting what is the draft master plan with input that we've had up to that date. And when you see the Federal Register, there'll be an end date for input on the Federal Register. That's it. Turn it over to the principal developer team.
Sorry, one moment while we get you unmuted.
And you'll be running the slides?
Okay, we can hear you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Peck. I'm the president and CEO of US Vets and one of the principal development team. As you see from the slide, our charge is to transform the North Campus into a community serving veterans. And over the next 15 minutes or so, we'll tell you how we're going to do that and the progress we've made thus far. Next slide, please. This is our development team. The three principal developers are US Vets. We are also one of the key service providers, Century Housing, and Thomas Safran Associates. It is a massive project, and we brought on architects, planners, landscapers, infrastructure to accomplish all that we need to accomplish on that North Campus. Next. We know that we are doing more than building a community. We are building a supportive community. The veterans that we're going to be serving have had challenges over their lives. And so it is our job to create a place where they can grow and learn and become successful. And we'll be providing a whole variety of services along with the housing in order to help them move forward. Next. We started with a set of guiding principles before we even imagined what we'd be building. We know first and foremost that it has to be a home for veterans, not just a place where they're staying temporarily. This will be their home, and for some of them, it will be their home for the remainder of their lives. It has to be a place where they can pursue opportunities. So we'll be talking a little bit about the services that we're providing to help them learn and grow. We're restoring an historical district, and so we have to keep that in mind before we begin building and make it a place where veterans are proud to be. Next. And these are some of the urban design strategies based on those guiding principles. We had to bring harmony to the campus. It's laid out in an unusual way, so we want to make sure that veterans are comfortable moving around the campus. We want to establish context, a neighborhood within a larger community, so that they can not only access the services on campus, but be free to go out into the community worship out there, use the metro to get out there. And we want to create critical mass. So you'll see that we'll be developing the campus from north to south, clustering those buildings. So immediately we're beginning to build a community where veterans can interact with each other. Next slide. We are going to build a therapeutic community. US Vets has been doing this for many years, including at Villages of Cabrillo, which we operate for veterans along with Century Housing. We've been doing that for more than the past 20 years, and creating all of the services and interactions that will help veterans move forward. We have resident councils, so we get input from veterans from each of the individual buildings. We hold town halls. We want to hear from the veterans that what we're doing is what is most helpful for them. So that, and by doing so, by engaging them in their own rehabilitation, it helps them move forward. And we'll then obviously be providing all the services that address the issues that they have, whether it's mental health, substance abuse, employment. We want there to be numerous amenities to get veterans out and around, creating not only mental health, physical health. Next. I'm going to turn it over to Blake from Thomas Safran Associates.
Hi, thanks so much, Steve. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Like Steve said, my name is Blake Coddington. I'm with Thomas Safran and Associates. Pleasure to be here speaking with you all this afternoon. I'm going to run through a couple slides, really talk about a few of our vision for the first 2 phases of development, as well as the infrastructure project that we have going on campus. In front of you on the screen is the phase 0 concept. It has 4 developments proposed. The grouping of 3 at the top of your screen are buildings 205, 208, and 209. 209 was redeveloped by the VA in 2015 and is currently occupied with 50 plus veterans. 205 and 208 are under construction now by Shangri-La, another developer, and they're set for an opening sometime mid next year. And then down towards the bottom of the plan, the lone building there is building 207, and that is the principal developer's first building that we broke ground on earlier this year, and we are on track for completion towards the end of next year. I will also point out on this plan, there are 2 colored lines, a light orange and light blue line from the east and west, and that denotes where our dry utility backbone has been installed. So I have another slide later on in the presentation and can speak more to that. So next slide. So building 207, this is an adaptive reuse, existing structure. We've designated this building as housing for homeless senior veterans, 62 and up. We have a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms in this project, and you can see there at the bottom what the rent would be for a veteran. All of these units have been assigned HUD-VASH vouchers. And so the rents that the veterans pay is a function of their income, but what is shown here, the rent limits are the ceiling for what could be paid. Next slide. So this slide is about the timeline and the funding sources secured. So like I said, we started construction in January of this year. We're on track for a Q3 calendar year 2022 completion. And like any of these, public-private partnerships, there's contributions of funding from both public and private. And so we have here, $8 million from the city, $5.7 million from the county, and then HUD-VASH vouchers. We also secured 4% tax credits and tax-exempt bonds from the state of California, and sold those tax credits for equity to our capital dollars to build this project. Next slide. Here are a few just construction progress images. So, you know, working around from the upper left corner around clockwise. You know, the first two photos are showing some of the structural work taking place, opening up of the floors, reinforcing the concrete, adding additional, you know, waste and drain pipes. The large image over on the right-hand side is denoting where future demising walls will be, separating the studio and one-bedroom units and kitchens and bathrooms. The lower middle photo is a two-story, you know, grand lobby, so where we'll have grand staircase, elevator, you know, really a welcoming entrance in the future building. And then the photo on the far left, bottom left, is meant to show the excavation that's taken place. So we've dug down approximately 1 floor to expose the basement and cut in new doors and windows to provide natural light into the space, and also a really warm and welcoming space for the, you know, future residents to use. So, next slide. So I mentioned earlier the dry utility backbone. So this slide is meant to highlight that. We have worked with the VA very closely to assess the condition of the existing infrastructure on the campus, and, you know, phase 1 of the North Campus infrastructure improvements is the dry utility backbone. We have brought new power, gas, and telecom service into the campus. The gas is coming from the west there in the light orange line, and the power and telecom is coming from the east under the 405. Project started in December of 2020. They're on track, contractors on track to finish at the end of this year. And I think I mentioned already that this funding was made possible through the VA, through a minor construction fund capital contribution through the Building 207 lease. So next slide. So here again, some construction progress images. Since these photos were taken, the crew continues to make good progress. They've backfilled these trenches and are now working on a portion of the street where the 405 and Sepulveda intersect. You know, but this shows you, you know, the area that's been backfilled and where conduits have been laid. A lot of progress has been made on this mile-long trench. So next slide. So here's our vision for the next grouping of developments, phase 1. What we've really tried to focus on with the help from the OAM and GLA team is creating critical mass. It's one of our urban design strategies, and what we're doing here is identifying buildings that are ripe for adaptive reuse, and also open parking lots and open space that are ready to be, you know, financed and designed and transformed into housing. So there are 7 or so projects here, as well as, you know, a future service hub in building 300. And I know that Steve will refer to this building later in the presentation. Also, as part of the phase 1 developments, we're working with GLA and OEM on assessment of the wet utility infrastructure for the campus, and continue those conversations to make sure that there's adequate water pressure, storm, sewer, et cetera, for the incoming housing, and we're making very good progress on that. So next slide. This will be my last slide. So building 402 is a new construction development on an existing parking lot, approximately 3 acres. TSA is the lead developer. We're proposing 120 units. We have so far a commitment of funding from LA County for $12 million, as well as 118 VASH vouchers to support the rental subsidy for the residents. We are intending to apply for tax credits here in early 2022, and if awarded, we would break ground to start work in Q4 of next year. So, next slide. I'm going to hand it back over to Steve. Thank you.
This is building 300 on the North Campus. This is immediately north of building 207, and this will be our supportive service hub. In that building, there will be 44 units of housing for veterans on the upper floors. But on the lower floor, there's 15,000 square feet of support service space. And this will be for the case managers, for the VASH case managers, and for multiple community partners and the VA. We've talked to the food bank about locating in there. There'll be a legal clinic in there. A Veterans Peer Access Network will be, so we'll have peers in there. Everything, every service that a veteran could need, both those living on campus, and we hope to attract veterans from outside campus so we can provide them the homeless prevention services that we provide, that USFS provide at our Patriotic Hall location downtown. And that's mental health, employment assistance, assistance for women veterans. We'd like all of that to be co-located in this building. Next. This is building 210. For both of these buildings, we're uncertain at this point of when we'll receive the buildings. VA has to complete construction South Campus, so we don't have a timeline on these yet. But building 210 has 3 levels. The lower level, which faces to the east, faces the ball field on the east, is ideally situated for a secure entry for women veterans. We are proposing a women veterans rehabilitation program. This is based on our advanced women's program in Long Beach that we've been operating for the last 20 years, providing them the intensive mental health assistance they may need if they've experienced military sexual trauma, for instance. And once they complete that rehabilitation, they'll move back out into the larger community. Next. I think I'm handing it over to Brian.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian D'Andrea. I'm Senior Vice President at Century Housing. Thank you so much for your presence today. Century is the third and final member of the principal developer team. We're, like USVets, we are a nonprofit organization founded by actually the same veteran that founded USVets, the late Judge Harry Pregerson. And to this day, we continue to be led by a veteran, Ron Griffith, our president and CEO. We're super excited to be playing a role here at the West LA VA, drawing on all of our experience. It's a very special piece of real estate with a long and very storied history. Building 404 will be one of our first projects. Building 404 will be located on what is presently parking lot 48 that fronts Building 207. It'll be a new construction development consisting of 73 studio apartments. We've recently secured a commitment of VASH vouchers from the county. We just submitted a large application to the state of California for VHHP funding. Recently, we're awarded $1 million of AHP funding, and if all goes well, we hope to break ground in late 2022. Next slide, please. Buildings 156 and 157 represent an adaptive reuse opportunity for an old tuberculosis hospital on the North Campus. The buildings are historic. They contribute to the historic district. We've recently received a $10 million commitment from the County of Los Angeles, along with a commitment of 110 project-based VASH vouchers. Last month, we submitted a significant application to the state of California for $19.2 million. And again, if all goes well with our funding applications, we hope to be in a position to break ground in late 2022. Next slide, please. So you've now heard from the principal developer on specific updates regarding many of our phase 1 buildings. I want to take a moment to zoom out and provide a bit of a global view of what our team has accomplished over the 2.5 years since we were selected. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that all of what we're about to communicate is entirely possible by the very productive working relationship that we've developed with the VA. The VA is our most important and critical partner in what we're trying to accomplish. And so we want to acknowledge all of the staff, both at GLA, and the OAEM group that have been working with us side by side as we undertake something that hasn't been done on a scale like this before. So to walk through a handful of our accomplishments from a planning perspective, we have spent several years planning. All of that work has been codified in a draft community plan that is now available for public review. Behind all of that work was an extensive amount of community outreach to our local veteran community, to VSOs, to local elected officials, public agency officials. And I want to say that the plan itself really builds upon the framework for a draft master plan and represents very much a roadmap, kind of an actionable roadmap for delivering on both the VA's commitments as well as our community's obligations to our veterans. All of those joint planning activities with the VA have also resulted in environmental clearance, both from a state perspective, that's the CEQA document, as well as from a federal perspective, the NEPA document. So those clearance documents have really paved the way for us to begin development work in earnest. We've also been advocating extensively for resources and regulation changes to make what we're proposing possible. Recently, President Biden signed into law the West LA Campus Improvement Act, and that very much is attributable to the leadership of Senator Feinstein and Congressman Ted Lieu. That piece of legislation ultimately paves the way for a very successful therapeutic community that we're trying to create. We've spent a lot of time assessing and planning for infrastructure upgrades. The dry utility project that Blake spoke about is nearing completion. We're supporting the VA in the launch of a wet utility project that will look to address domestic and fire water, storm drain, and sewer needs. And lastly, I want to comment that we've recently hired a director of community development for our efforts, Tess Banco, who some of you may know. We've launched a website, and we are in the process of establishing a 501c3 nonprofit backbone organization that will serve as our what we might describe as kind of a container of change, serve as kind of the convener of many of the different stakeholders that presently operate and that will operate on the North Campus in the future, all in service to our veterans. Next slide, please. Over the past couple of years, our principal developer team has been quietly doing what we do as affordable housing developers, which is methodically applying for housing capital. For those of you with experience in the affordable housing world, you'll know that affordable housing deals can sometimes require 4 to 8 or more sources of financing. It's a painstaking process of competing for local, state, county resources that are scarce. So we've been hard at work applying for those funding resources, and to date, we've secured more than $95 million of commitments. We've secured more than 400 VASH vouchers, and we have more than $50 million of pending applications with the state of California at this time, with more to come. Next slide, please. As I alluded to earlier, we're working very much in partnership with the VA, doing something at a scale that hasn't been done before in our country. It's really an extraordinary project, once-in-a-lifetime project as we think about it. But as a result of that, a lot of challenges exist. I just spoke to some of the funding challenges. We're facing very scarce resources for affordable housing. The resources that exist at the local, county, and state level are highly competitive. They're typically oversubscribed 2, 3, 4 times to 1. They're on different timelines. In some cases, applications for state programs have been challenged by some of the particularities of the West LA VA campus, its real estate, the density, the proximity to transit, mapping data. We have been in an active dialogue with our leadership at the state of California, our speaker's office, our assembly member's office, HCD, the governor's office, to advocate for changes to policy and regulation that will enable state resources to flow to the North Campus. Another big challenge we're presently facing is that bond volume is capped. The process for securing tax-exempt bonds in the state of California is now competitive. That has the potential to slow down our development process. We're working again with our legislative leadership to promote a resolution of that issue. Presently in Congress, there is legislation circulating the Affordable Housing, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act that would address this particular issue. Next slide. We've also spoken today about infrastructure challenges. There are some very extraordinary needs. The infrastructure on the North Campus is aging. In some cases, it's 80, 90 plus years old, and it will require significant and continued investment by the VA. We're working with the VA to hopefully leverage as many external resources as we can. And lastly, from a legislative perspective, we want to acknowledge the leadership of Congressman Ted Lieu, Senator Feinstein for co-sponsoring the West LA Campus Improvement Act, which I just mentioned was recently signed into law. We're also continuing to work for state appropriations. We're pleased to report that as part of the recent state budget that was signed into law, Governor Newsom, new resources have been made available for our projects at the West LA VA. Next slide, please. So as we look to the year ahead, we will be completing our planning activities. We look forward to your feedback and engagement on the community plan document that's been published. We will be fully pivoting to pre-development and construction activities. We'll continue to support the VA in the infrastructure planning that is required to support the housing that we wish to create. We'll continue to implement the backbone organization, coordinating with the Veteran Partnership Council, creating a continuum of care and housing across the entire North Campus, including VA-run facilities, facilities that are run by third parties like New Directions, Step Up on Second, the Cal Vet Home, and we'll continue to advocate for fundraising and other policy changes to promote the housing in the community we're seeking to establish. Next slide, please. This is where we look to you to help us. We cannot do this alone. This is, as I mentioned, a truly phenomenally complex task. It really is a situation where it's all hands on deck. We've listed here in this slide a number of different ways that you can work with us. You can provide us your feedback. You can assist us in telling the story of progress that's happening here. You can share your inspiring stories, photographs, other experiences that you had at the West LA VA. We will be launching a capital campaign. If you're so inclined, we would love to count on your support. There are lots of volunteer opportunities in support of our vets. And lastly, we would love your feedback on this opportunity to name the North Campus. We've listed here a website where you can provide feedback on services, amenities, as well as naming opportunities. This concludes our official presentation by the principal developer. I'll turn things back over to our friends and colleagues at the VA. Thank you very much.
You're muted, Mac.
Everything I just said times 2. All right, appreciate it. I'm going to leave this slide up while we talk. This is where we can go, and we've got a document already in the blue box in the center there, informational document, and we're going to load this presentation there as well, and we'll have some other enhancements to these sites as we go along. This is our first initial outreach on this effort, and we've got some things going here and other things we'll have online the next day, and then tomorrow we'll have the slide deck you're seeing now printed. There were 2 questions that came in, so go ahead and grab those. Go ahead.
Both questions were regarding the availability of the slides. The questions were whether they'd be made available to the public, and the answer to that is yes. Following the conclusion of this town hall, an email will be sent to all of you that contains the slide deck.
Okay, so we'll stand by for a minute or so if folks are typing a question in or have additional information. But we really want to provide this website for you to go through the questionnaire. It's grouped by categories to help get the information organized, but you can also upload a document there. And then when we put out the Federal Registry here, probably within a month, that'll have a matter of maybe a month or so to provide some feedback there. And we'll get that information back in, and you can upload documents there as well.
All right, it appears that there are no more questions at this time. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us for this evening's town hall. Please keep in mind that if you have any questions after the town hall, you can use the link that is on the screen at the top to submit your questions. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.